Hello everyone, welcome back. Wisteria here. If you're listening on my podcast, hi there. You can find me on YouTube. Wisteria Energy Twister is the name, same as my podcast. Of course, you can also just listen to me on the podcast, either way. So, the second story regarding hauntings in Shropshire is called The Boogies and the Salt Box. Some people say the Bogies, but it's more the Boogies, just so we are clear. There was once a farmer by the name of Reynolds. He was a wealthy man with plenty of land and several properties to his name around the area. The time came for him to be married to another landowner's daughter. The preparations were made, both for the wedding and afterwards. His bride-to-be had her eye on his house at Ghosty Bank. It was a grand place, though perhaps a little old-fashioned. No one remembered quite what it had been built like, why it had been built, when, in fact. No one remembered. People said that the gentry had lived there once upon a time. Well, Mr. Reynolds had a nagging doubt somewhere at the back of his mind about the old house, but he could think of no good reason to say no, and he wanted to please his betrothed. So he sent a team to check everything over, clean up, do all the repairs, and air the old place out, as you would expect. By the time the big day came, the house was gleaming, filled with flowers, and very welcoming to the newlyweds. And Mrs. Reynolds was very eager to put her stamp upon the place. "Give it a woman's touch," she said. She scattered her linen throughout the house, smoothed her embroidered tablecloth over the table, and, best of all, bought out, as she picked it herself, a beautiful silver salt box. Apparently, a family heirloom she had found at a market stall that had long been lost. She doesn't know why, though. She put it in pride of place, on the dresser, not believing her luck that she'd actually managed to find it on a market stall for a cheap price. There now, it feels like a proper home, she declared. But the honeymoon period was short. They were already a couple living at a farm. Two old, wizened faces peered down from the rafters like two apples, dried and crinkled, after being stored for the winter. They sat unseen, watching all the preparations taking place. They smiled at the bridegroom as he carried the bride over the threshold. It had been a long and lonely time since they had been joined by company. At first it was little things, easily brushed off. Mrs. Reynolds' mirror went missing from her dresser and was eventually found under her pillow, but not before she'd accused all the maids of taking it. The broom was never where the maids left it. The milk turned sour quicker than it could ever have turned sour anywhere else, and the fox got in and killed the chickens. The lads and maids began to whisper about there being bad luck about that farm, trying to get a new place at the next fair. None of the maids liked being alone in the house. They would feel eyes watching them and would catch movements at the edge of their vision. The cowman, who would bring the cows in for milking in the half-light before dawn, talked of two shadows skulking along the hedgerow behind him. When Mr. Reynolds first heard the rumours, he laughed them off, but he had a nagging disquiet and couldn't help but wonder why the place had lain empty for so long. Soon he too saw the shadows. Two dark figures, and a quiet chuckle accompanied any mishap or bad fortune on the farm. One day, the youngest maid, Hannah, got locked in the root cellar and was trapped alone in the dark for hours before they found her. In floods of tears, she told anyone who would listen how she had sat huddled in a corner while laughter seemed to just nothing but dance around her. Unseen hands pulling her hair, and she was pinched black and blue. She packed her bags, left first thing the next morning, and she never minded her fee either. She just left. Mr. Reynolds, feeling rather foolish, decided to seek help. He made his way into town and went to see Tom, the blacksmith, farrier, and the man of wisdom. Mr. Reynolds waited for a quiet moment before dipping his head under the lintel. Tom looked up from the forge, his face lit by the glow. "Ah, I wondered how long it would be before you come through the doorway. Give me an hour to finish my work and put the forge to bed, and we'll take a walk, shall we, Tom?" The two set off across the fields and climbed up towards the Callow. They sat looking down over the farm. Tom imparted his advice. "The problem is that on your farm you have a couple of Boogies. No, they're not ghosts, but they were never human. No one knows quite where they come from. It's probably best not to talk about it too loud or for too long, but they are old spirits, without souls, without consciences. They have made a home in that old place, and they've taken to you and your family. As I see it, you have three possible choices. You can either learn to live with them, you can banish them, or you can move out." Mr. Reynolds opened his mouth to speak, but Tom held up his hand and carried on. "Those are your options, but it may not be that easy. Your ancestors ended up moving out, and I doubt that was their first choice. There are lots of things you can try, but I don't hold out much hope that they'll work. Those spirits have lived apart from humans for a long while, and they're having fun. But you may be able to tame them. Be polite, be neighbourly. Tip your hat, say good evening. If you feel they're near, try leaving a bowl of cream out for them. If you can get them to help you instead of torment you, they'll be the best thing that ever happened to you on that farm. Mark my words, they will." Well, Mr. Reynolds went home and told his wife what Tom had said. They gathered their stuff and their staff together and told them to be polite to the neighbours and their plan of leaving cream out each night. But the attempt did not work. Their gestures of friendship were received with snickers, laughter, raspberry blowing. The cream was not drunk, but instead left as a trail of milky footprints through the house, whipped and daubed over the windows and used to drown the cat. The spirits were becoming bolder and more clearly defined. All who lived at the farm regularly saw glimpses of the old man or woman here and there, usually followed by some sort of mischief. At night, when the household had gone all to bed, they would creep in like cats and curl up by the fire. Only a few days after his first visit, Mr. Reynolds was back at Tom's doorstep. "I think those Boogies have got too strong a hold on that place now, but try and banish them if you will. I'll write you some charms to hide through the house. I think you should get a minister." This is what Tom said to Mr. Reynolds. So Mr. Reynolds took himself off, straight to the minister. The next day, Mr. Reynolds hid the charms, one in each room in the barn. The minister arrived with his book under his arm, lit his candle and began to read. The room filled with laughter. A shadowy form appeared next to the minister, and the old woman blew out the candle. From the rafters, the old man tipped over a jug of cream, covering the minister and soaking the pages of the Bible. While the minister nobly tried to continue, from memory, the pair tormented him by pinching and prodding, pushing and shoving. The minister battered at them like flies, but they crowded around him like smoke. He could neither touch nor escape them until he pushed his way out of the farm and fled down the road, swearing never to set foot in that damned place again. "I thought it would probably come to this," said Tom, as he sat on the grass with Mr. Reynolds after the incident occurred. "Those spirits are deep roots in that old farm. If you really want rid of them, it will take some doing. You need to leave, but be discreet." Surreptitiously, the Reynolds started moving things out, sending them to a smaller farm that they owned. And at last the day of leaving arrived. The two spirits were curled up in front of the fire as the couple silently gathered their last few belongings and loaded them onto a cart. The horses' feet had been muffled, and they quietly left the farm to start afresh. Reynolds and his wife set to work at making their home in the new farm, unpacking all the belongings. It soon transpired that somehow Mrs. Reynolds' salt box had been left behind. She was in a terrible state, and was determined that it must be retrieved immediately. Well, of course, Mr. Reynolds wouldn't let his wife go back. Instead, he sent the cowman to go and fetch it, telling him he must not be seen. The cowman was not pleased with the job, but he agreed and set off with young Edward, the stable lad, to keep him company. The two dawdled down the road, and they hadn't gone far when they saw the old woman and old man walking towards them. There was nothing shadowy about them. Bald, and being bold as brass, they came stepping along the way, the two old faces crinkling into smiles when they saw the cowman and Edward. The Boogies danced up to the visitors, brandishing before them the forgotten silverware. "We brought your salt box," they announced. There was nothing for it but to turn around, and the four of them walked to the new farm together. Mrs. Reynolds saw them coming first, and her face turned ashen. One of the maids ran, squeaking, into the house, and a moment later, Mr. Reynolds came out, stood with his arm around his wife's waist. He gave her a squeeze, and they both smiled at the couple and pretended to be delighted to see them. It was a cold day. With a meaningful look, they took the cowman to make sure the fire was going well in the kitchen, and to tell the cook to set some food to welcome the guests. While all was being got ready, the Reynolds showed the old couple around the new farm. When they went into the kitchen, a great fire was blazing. Beef and beer were set ready on the table. In front of the fire, a thick, fresh bed of straw had been strewn to make a comfortable place for the Boogies to sit. Underneath the straw, unmoving and unseen, Tom lay hidden, waiting. The Boogies sat down with the Reynolds and ate and talked. When the bellies were full, the Boogies couldn't resist the fire any more and made their way to sit on the straw, warm themselves by the flames. That was the moment Tom had been waiting for. From beneath the straw, he leapt up and tumbled the two spirits into the fire, straw and all. Then Tom and Farmer Reynolds grabbed hold of the pitchforks and brooms waiting ready, and beat the two back, keeping them on fire until they shriveled to nothing but dust and ashes. Tom and Mr. Reynolds put down their implements and, together with Mrs. Reynolds and the farm staff, they silently watched the fire burn down. That was the end of the two Boogies, with the meddling and mischief. The Reynolds went back to Ghosty Bank, and spirits never troubled the place, ever again, so it is said. And that's the end of that haunting. Well, it's a haunting tale, I guess. And, Boogies, bogies, whatever you want to call them, but technically it is Boogies, because it's B-O-O-G, so I-E-S, that's Boogies. They're brownies, but they've been left for so long that they turn into like goblins and hobgoblin type things, and they create havoc in your house. They've been on their own too long. That was the issue. So they weren't really going to stop the mischief, were they? But I love stories like that. I think they're great. Anyway, guys, if you're listening to this on YouTube, hit that like, please. It's absolutely free. It helps me out. Leave a comment. Share if you can. And if you're not yet subscribed, feel free to do so. Or if you prefer to go to the podcast, please do that. It is out there for my members on my YouTube channel, just in case. Many blessings.